Yeah, it'd be like if McDonald's was like, look, we know our food makes you fat, it kills you, like it's not healthy, but it's quick, it's tasty, and it's delicious. It's like, how could you argue with that? Like, it's like.
Hi, I'm Kyle Werkerly, certified professional ghostwriter. I'm glad you're listening as I welcome industry experts to share stories of lessons learned the hard way, overcoming professional hurdles, turning experience into actionable knowledge, and how to connect with your target audience. This is the Career Challenges Podcast. Welcome to the Career Challenges Podcast, and my guest for this episode is Tyler McCune, and he's a copywriter. So Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So you're a copywriter, and you help businesses to, of course, write copy either because they don't have the skill set at the time or they just don't want to do it, or all three. So I guess in your own words, describe what you do for your clients, and then later on, let's dive into how you do it.
Yeah, so I label myself as a copywriter, and obviously, like anyone who labels themselves anything, they wear different hats and help their clients out in different ways. But the main deliverable I do for my clients is email copy. So most of my clients have a list, and they're either emailing daily or multiple times a week, and I'll go ahead and write the email copy. But what actually goes into any copywriter's job is actually, I'm sure as a ghostwriter, it's all in the research and interviewing the client and getting those juicy stories and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, what a copywriter can do for people is quite broad ranging, but yeah, I write copy, I do market research, I kind of help my clients with their marketing strategy and just anything that is, sales and print, or is trying to get customers on scale or upsell existing customers. Anything like that is usually what I'm helping my clients with.
All right. So do you help them, I guess, with email sequencing? They opt in and then they'll get maybe 3 or 4 emails over the course of a week or a month?
Yeah. I don't do that's more like autoresponders. I'm not super into that. I do more like broadcast emails. So like one of my clients that I'm working with, we're going to start doing daily emails. So literally every day an email goes out to his list, is selling something. But yeah, I mean, it just really depends on what your strategy is. I think broadcast emails work better than autoresponders, but there's a lot of people out there who would argue with me. So it's really just what your strategy is and what your goals are.
So what kind of strategy have you seen a lot of success with? Is that the opt-in approach, or is it more just those broadcasting, or is there a third option out there that I'm probably missing?
Right. So like all the lists that I sell to, they'll either have opted in, which is, everyone knows, like it's just you enter your email, or they bought something from like one of my clients. They don't get opt-ins, they only get buyers, which there's pros and cons to both approach. But yeah, so everyone that I would be contacting would have either opted in or bought something. And as far as which strategy works best, it really just depends on what your goals and outcomes are. So for example, I'm writing for 2 clients right now. One, they do, they basically sell info products to like digital agency owners. And so for them, it's really about daily contact, like selling a lot of their products because they have tons of different courses and coaching options and stuff like that. And it's a lot about like building a relationship with their list, building a personal brand. So I'm emailing in a way that's very much sales driven, like very much trying to sell, whatever we're promoting, have to be promoting that day, but always in the background knowing like this is a relationship between them and their list. This is like their personal brand. So I have to be kind of building that as well. And then my other client, he's selling to like CEOs a very, very high ticket coaching package. So for him, it's not so much about like, oh, let's sell this thing. It's more like a slow process of them warming up because his market is extremely sophisticated. So I can't just go out there being like, this is going to transform your business, blah, 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 blah. These guys are like, they're making $1 million a year a lot of times because they're like genius business owners. So it's just a completely different strategy where it's all about credibility, having that like business casual conversation. And it really runs the gamut. A lot of people, they're just always trying to sell and they don't really care about building that personal brand. So I can't say which strategy works best. For me, I think it's all about building like a compelling personality and building your personal brand around that. Because then no matter what you do, whether it's copywriting, ghostwriting, or you're like, I want to be a personal trader or whatever, people will still be attracted to your personality and that bond built with you. And I think a great example of this is Joe Rogan. Like he's not in the jujitsu niche, he's not in the like health supplement niche, but he's been able to kind of sell all those things because he was a compelling personality first and foremost.
Definitely. So when a client comes to you and they're not quite sure what the strategy is that will work best for them, I guess walk me through that process of how you assess their needs and then find a strategy that can, of course, meet their needs, but also one that is viable for them to do.
Right. So it really starts with a bunch of different questions. So being a copywriter is very much there's a journalism hat you have to wear where you just have to ask questions and follow up on leads and keep on digging for that story. So it's really a lot about me asking them the right questions, figuring out what are your goals. Like, are you like, for example, one of my clients, he wants to double his sales this year. But not every client wants to do that. Some clients, as you were saying, they just don't want to write their own copy anymore. And they're like, I'm happy if sales stay where they're at. I want this off my plate. So most of the brands that I work with, it is about building that personal and compelling personality into your brand. But, it really just depends on what your goals and outcomes are. And there's no like easy template. So email copy might not be like the right for your business. Some people do great just hanging out on LinkedIn all day. It's never really worked for me or made sense to me, but it's really what your goals are and what you enjoy doing, I would say. Because if you don't enjoy doing it, like if you hated podcasting, you probably wouldn't be sustainable. And I've seen so many podcasts where it's like they got 3 episodes and then they quit. So I think I'm a big proponent of finding what works for you.
Yeah, pod fade. I was worried I'm going to run out of people who want to be on my show. So. Definitely. So if a client comes to you and they say, I have, X strategy and I want to start implementing that, can you help me? In your market research that you do for each client, you discover, okay, this strategy might work for them, but there's another strategy that might do better. How do that kind of conversation go with your client?
Oh, I mean, it really just depends. Obviously, they hired me because they wanted my expertise. So many times they will just listen to me. And other times it's like they're pretty stuck in their ways. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, like here's the thing is I actually don't know what's going to work, and no copywriter does. And any copywriter who says like, I know exactly what headline or lead or offer is going to work, they just don't. And I'll give you an example. Guthrie Drinker is like the biggest infomercial. So I can't remember the name, but like the most famous face acne cream. Maybe like during the. Anyway,
was it proactive?
Yeah,
proactive. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that's the Guthrie Drinker, and they have a bunch of other products, and they just do tons of sales every year just via infomercials, or primarily via infomercials. And apparently, from what I heard, 9 out of 10 of their infomercials don't make money or break even. So like most of their infomercials are losing them money. And then every once in a while they'll have like a hit, and that'll make them a ton of money. And so that's really like where the money is made in a lot of copywriting niches. And it is kind of to tie this back into having a compelling personality. The reason to build up that compelling personality is that you don't have those hits and flops because people are buying you. So even if you don't have the best email or sales letter that day, people will still be pre-sold. So it's kind of like your listeners in this podcast. If they've come and they've listened to, let's say a couple dozen of your podcasts, and they're like, I like Kyle, I like what he has to say. I know him. He's heard some stories about his life. And then maybe you have maybe they listen to this one. They're like, Tyler guy, that was a terrible guest, terrible podcast. But there still probably will be like, I'm still going to listen to the next one because I have that relationship with Kyle. So that's, to me, is why the best strategy for right now would be to build a compelling personality and be your own personal brand. But of course, we were talking and we're both introverts. It's not always easy and comfortable to put yourself out there. Like when I first started mailing daily, it was a bit scary, like someone opts out or, it's just like, oh, was that not a good email? So yeah, I would just say, again, it's all up to you and your goals. But if you build a compelling personality and attract the right audience and put the right offers in front of them, like you'll never lose, basically.
Definitely. So I guess what kept you going? Because for me, to be honest, some of the posts I put out on LinkedIn or some of the emails I sent out, I felt, this is great stuff. It's totally going to land. People are just going to come to me in droves. And you hear crickets, obviously. Mm-hmm. You can't get it right the first time, or it just doesn't hit the way you thought it would. And I got very, dejected because of that. And I thought, well, what's the point of doing this if, I send out one email and nobody responds? But, you realize it's the consistency. And so I felt I wasted a lot of time thinking, well, I failed at that, or this isn't going to work for me, so I'm not going to do that. So what kept you going, Tyler, when I guess those first couple of emails probably didn't get the reaction you wanted?
Yeah, I think when I started mailing daily, I had like 4 subscribers or something like that, like really low. But I kind of have a cheat code for this because the main reason I started mailing daily was I just wanted to practice my copy every day. And so even if, like that's really what drives me in a certain sense. But there's a lot of other things, listening to people sharing their stories, like the Gunthy Ranker, where like the best copywriters fail many times. I'm sure the best ghostwriters write books that don't get published. Or, I'm not exactly sure how that world works. Mm-hmm. So hearing stories of other people failing and overcoming, and also like I have people from all over the world responding to my emails and being like, "Oh, this is such a good insight. Like, thank you for this tip." And on my email list, I barely talk about marketing and copywriting. It's really strange. I used to talk about that almost exclusively. And then I started talking about like my personal life and like going to visit my grandma and doing handstands and all the things that I just enjoy doing. Like just talking to people like a friend at a bar or something. And I get way better engagement now. Like people are always emailing me and yeah, I mean like that's really what keeps me going is like seeing someone from India email and be like, wow, this is my favorite email of yours, Tyler. And just knowing that they have a favorite email of mine, it's like, wow, like, it's kind of cool. But I think if you put yourself out there long enough, you're going to start getting those wins. And then that's what keeps you going. It's like the golfers, they'll have like 1 par and 17 just terrible holes. And they think of that 1 par, and that's what keeps them going back.
Wow. Yeah, true. Yeah. I'm not a big golf guy, but I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah, I'm not either. I just, I've heard a lot of golf guys talk about that.
Yes, it's like a common metaphor that everyone can
exactly
relate to.
Full sport.
Yeah, they'll see it. But with the pandemic, just a little side note here. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of golf. It's boring. And then when the pandemic hit, my father-in-law kept watching golf.com and our golf TV or the golf channel. And they would do the reruns of the golf. I'm like, this is what we've come to. We're watching the reruns of the most boring game ever. Anyway, I'm sure some of my listeners are going to be like, well, I'm just not going to listen to Kyle anymore. But I'm like, hey, I got to be honest. I just don't like golf. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's not only a boring game. It's quite frankly miserable.
Yes, true. I mean, I've done Top Golf. Do they have Top Golf out there where you go and you just hit balls? At like certain targets, yeah.
Driving range, yeah.
Yeah, well, this one is set up more as a game. It's not just to practice your swing or anything. Right. You actually have targets out there, and the closer ones are like 10 points, and then the ones way down there are like 100 points. And so that was fun because I just was, whacking at golf balls all day. I wasn't trying to, finesse it or read the green and find the break and all that. It was just, I'm going to hit a ball at that target down there.
That's actually, you asked me like, how do you keep on going? That's, I think, a perfect metaphor to explain it is like, if you, let's say you're writing daily emails or like whatever, once a week or a LinkedIn post, like if you're sitting there like, oh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to persuade them? Like, it's not going to flow. So you just have to kind of like go out there and swing the club and hit the balls. And you'll be surprised how over time you get better and better, especially if you're like learning this stuff. But I would tell people to go back and listen to what you just said about the driving range and just have that in mind before they do anything. Like, I mean, musicians talk about that, athletes talk about that. So I think that was, there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Definitely. We total accident. I didn't plan that at all.
Yeah, it's better that way.
Definitely. So 2 points I want to go back to as well. Mary Henderson, the first one, Mary Henderson, a previous guest, we were talking about personal branding a lot. That was a big thing that we were covering in our conversation on that episode. And I brought up that, if you say this is my personal brand, it disappears. It's almost as if, you say it goes away. So then as a copywriter, when a client comes to you and says, I want to build my personal brand, what can I do to do that? How do you handle that kind of, I guess, approach or strategy that the client wants?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, my clients don't come to me and say, I want to build my personal brand. They come to me and say, hey, I'm overworked and I need to get this copy off my plate, or they're like, my sales need to go up. So those are usually what my clients say to me, but it's just a concern that I know that they have, even if they don't know it and they're not thinking in terms of personal brand. Like I just know in the back of my head, but the fact is that you're building your personal brand, whether you're trying to or not. So if you show up on LinkedIn and you're like cussing or, like teasing, like doing something that's like kind of low class, like that's building your personal brand, but just you're not doing it consciously. So for me, a big part of building my client's personal brand, and I'm not by no means like the branding expert. I just kind of know it from a email copy aspect a little bit. But so for example, like, what is your philosophy? So like Kyle, I'm sure you have like a philosophy for the show that's deeper than just like, oh, I'm going to go talk on this podcast. So like things like that, like what is their philosophy? What are their quirks? Like what kind of separates them in the marketplace? Because if you just go out there competing against all other podcasters, I mean, you just get lost in that sea. But if someone's like, oh, I know Kyle, he stands for this thing, then that kind of becomes more like a movement that people can get behind. So I think that's like the main thing I think of when I think about clients' personal brand, is just differentiating them in the marketplace just by like the language they use, even like offers, like what they talk about, and also sort of differentiating themselves, differentiating my clients through their philosophy. So personality and philosophy, as I would say, it goes down to.
Definitely. So then when they ask you to write copy for them, do they want just, straight, this is the sales message, or this is the story we're going to use? Or are you trying to, I guess, imbue that copy with some of their personality to help build that brand?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the name of the game, is like, if you read my emails, like if someone gets on my list or they go to my blog, which is like, I just have all of my emails, they'll see like that is very much me. And I have like a totally different strategy and personality going on over there than when I write for my clients. So for example, the one client who's like selling to CEOs, he is going to be a very business casual tone. And where I might go a little bit off the rails, I'm not going to like make silly jokes or like use a lot of puns and stuff like that. It's going to be very business casual.
Sure.
And he also has like a very kind of non-fluffy, like stern, tell it how it is approach. So I'm going to make that very much a part of the personality and tone when I write those emails. And for my other clients, they do have a lot more fun brand where they have like they have sharks as part of their name, so that they have like all these shark puns and all these different kind of silly things, and it works for their market. And those guys, like, they live in Hawaii and they're super positive and optimistic and always like joking around. So for them, it really works. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think if a copywriter doesn't try to imbue your personality, be very skeptical. And we could talk about some of the ways that I do that if you think.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah. How, I guess, if it were me, Kyle Walkerly, coming to Tyler McCune, I need to expand my list. How would you find out about my personality?
Yeah. So it's that journalism hat. So first I give them like a very in-depth questionnaire. Like, it's almost so long that I think it pisses my clients off, quite frankly.
Wow.
But it's really what I need to get to know them. And then we get on like an hour and a half call usually. And I just go deeper into those questions, and I usually say, like, can you show up with 10 stories to tell me that? And I kind of like list out, like, tell me a story about, like, that taught you a lesson about this stage in your life. Like, I'll reference it based on their questionnaire. And I'll just get their stories, and then I'll get that interview transcribed, listen to it a handful of times, go through it, highlight parts that are interesting, like take notes on it, get like, if they have like some repeating language, like some people say of course a lot, or for example, things like that, I kind of like make notes of that. And then quite frankly, you can pull big chunks of text straight from those transcripts. And like, you can write, obviously you change little bits in here, and the client's like, oh my gosh, this nailed my voice. I'm like, well, yeah, you said 90% of that. But yeah, I'm sure I would be interested to know how you do it too, because I'm sure you go through a similar process.
Well, it's similar, clients. Yeah, because in ghostwriting, we're trying to find their tells. We call that tells, like you mentioned, of course, as they say, of course, a lot. That'd be their tell, but also their cadence when they talk, because some people will use really quick, short sentences, or they'll be punchy. One guest, Lonnie Ray, I messed up your name. I apologize. Lonnie Ray, she had a lot of zingers in her when she was talking. And so I was thinking, if I were to write in her voice, I would have to figure out how to put in a zinger. Not every line, but every like few lines, because that was just the way she talked, and she usually would start her answers with a zinger like that and then explain them. And then I had another client, a business coach. He spoke very I'm trying to remember exactly how I described it back to him, because he asked, well, what is my voice like? I said, well, you're very even. I mean, he's very passionate about what he does. He's super excited about it, and you can tell that talking to him. But it's not like, I'm going to raise my voice all the time. It was, just an intensity, I guess, almost in the way he spoke. But his voice, the pitch, it didn't really change that much. It wasn't monotone, but it didn't change that much. And so to convey that to a page was always a challenge, because, when you're talking, of course, in a situation like this, you can tell from inflection, how people react. So with him, it was like, how do I convey that into the written word? So that was always fun. So yeah, it's similar to what you do, but I do it more through interviews. Definitely like this, like on a Zoom call like that.
Sure, writing a book is a much. You guys probably, your process probably goes over months, I would imagine.
True, yeah. Average time is about 6 months. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So then, with your client, once you feel you have their personality down, do they come back to you and say, "Well, I didn't realize I spoke like that"? Do you get that response a lot?
I've never gotten that response. I've gotten like a lot of different responses, like, "Oh my God, you sounds just like me," but no, I've never had someone say. I think people. I mean, I can't say that I put it exactly in their voice, because I'm obviously making it. It's sort of like a salesman. Like a salesman would talk to you differently when he was trying to sell you something than he would necessarily to like his friend at the bar. So I kind of almost put like their salesman voice on and try to make it as interesting and compelling as possible. Because when you're writing a book, if someone buys like a, I don't know, $15 or $20 book, they're kind of committed to reading it. I'm not saying like trying to cheapen what you do, but like you don't have to make it as interesting the whole way through, I would say, because like when you read, you just read a book differently than like you read something on your phone. Like you're like it's just like LinkedIn, you're scrolling, or emails, you're scrolling. It's just a different mindset. So for copy, it's really important to like always stay engaging. So if I had a client who was boring, like I would have to change it to make them not boring, because people would read and buy from it. But I hope that makes sense.
True. Yeah, I totally see what you're saying. Another guest I had, we were talking about fonts and how even the font gives the text or whatever you're reading kind of a different feel. So like sans serif fonts obviously are used in emails or LinkedIn posts, social media posts, because it's easier for the brain to see that and process it and move on, which is what they want. They want you to be constantly ingesting information and stuff on the social media posts. Whereas in a book, you want a serif font. So that way it kind of leads your eyes across the line by line, and you're more engaged in it. So, even just the font can affect how you read, the stuff in front of you. And like you're saying, of course, people are going to read email copy differently than what they would read with different motivations for reading a book. So, I mean, that's stuff that I could talk about for hours as well, but we won't get into that. Anyway,
that's fascinating. I got to say, I'm a big fan of serif font. So
yeah, definitely. My go-to font is Palatino Linotype, because it's on most computers, and you don't have to worry about it transferring over.
Interesting. Yeah. I like that one too. I've used it.
Definitely. At first, I thought Times New Roman was where it's at, but it's actually tighter than Palatino Linotype.
It's a little basic.
Yeah, it's basic, and it's a newspaper font, so it's meant to cram as much as possible into the page. Whereas Palatino Linotype is more of a book font. So little typography nerdism there. But yeah, the second point I was going to make earlier, I was talking with Dennis Ross, another ghostwriter, how we're kind of coming into the fan economy now. The brick and mortar, not to say that it's done, but definitely business is being done more on the digital space. I don't see that really changing even once we get past this pandemic. I feel that, there's going to be much more buying and social influence happening in the digital space than it used to. And it's probably just going to keep growing. So then for a copywriter, knowing that people are going to try and, I guess, get more fans per se, how do you handle that? Because we already talked about imbuing personality, but I guess can you approach it as a copywriter that, people are going to want fans?
I love this. Thank you for asking this question, because this is something I actually wanted to talk about. Because I think so much in copywriting, it's like people focus on making the sale, and there's good reasons for that. Like traditionally, copywriting comes from infomercials, direct mail, where they would like mail you a sales letter. So a lot of times you buy from someone, and then sure, they'd send you another sales pitch, but it might be from like a different, like you wouldn't even know that it was the same like company that was selling you the same sales pitch. So it didn't really matter so much as building up that trust factor and like limiting buyer's remorse. But today I think that it's all about limiting buyer's remorse, getting people to like decide to buy your product rather than like manipulate them into buying it. And I think it starts first and foremost just from being completely honest, like almost more honest than you think you have to be, like admitting your flaws, telling people, yeah, I don't, like maybe I'm not the best at this, or maybe I'm not perfect at that or whatever, but like just being so blatantly honest that people trust you, because that's like the currency today, in my opinion, is trust. Like no one trusts the president of the United States or Congress or the newspapers or anyone really, like, and no one is to be trusted at this point. There's even, it's like very 1984 in a way, or
Sure.
A Brave New World. But my point is that if you're just really honest with people, even if they won't have buyer's remorse, they'll buy your product and they'll be like, wow, I actually got a fair deal because his marketing actually didn't overhype it, it underhyped it. So I was kind of a rambling sentence, but I hope that made sense. It's just if you over deliver and under promise, a lot of times that'll help you more, even though you might be making less initial sales on the back end, selling to those people over and over again, and quite frankly, creating fans, it'll pay you off in the long term.
Definitely. So, I mean, for building trust, what if your client doesn't want to, I guess, be vulnerable? Not to say that they're going to lie and manipulate. They just, their personal life is their personal life and business is business. I mean, in that situation, do you try and get some of their personal life in there, or you just keep it business?
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily. I think vulnerability is great, because when you're vulnerable with someone, they'll trust you more, and like this is someone who trusts me, so they're kind of like part of the tribe. It's very instinctual, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean like getting personal and showing that part of yourself. And for example, the client that I'm working with who sells to CEOs, one of the things about his coaching program is, first of all, it's really expensive. I mean, there's no getting around it. It's just a big number, and it's a monthly payment. So it's not for everyone. And I think we're just better off being upfront. It's not for everyone. If you can't afford to pay this, then we don't even want you, quite frankly. I mean, you can like read the emails, but we don't want, we're just not interested. And the other thing is that it's not like a quick fix. It's not like he's going to go in there and solve all their problems. He's going to help them become the type of people who can solve their own problems. So it's going to take a lot of personal work from them. And again, we're totally better off just being upfront, because we'll actually choose the people who will be better prospects for him. Where if we promise all this, glamour and glitz, then we're going to choose people who are attracted to that, and they'll be very underwhelmed with the product and totally dissatisfied. Whereas if we get less people, but they're all really, really happy, then they'll stay in his program for years. So yeah, it's not about necessarily being vulnerable personality, like with like personal life. It's more about just being completely honest with the pros and cons of your product, because every product has pros and cons.
Sure. That's a great point. I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be like if McDonald's was like, look, we know our food makes you fat. It kills you. It's not healthy, but it's quick, it's tasty, and it's delicious. It's like, how could you argue with that? Like, it's like, I don't necessarily like McDonald's, but it's like, like everything you guys just said was true. So I'm not saying that's the best approach, but just a silly example.
Yeah. A great example. Would you like to be a guest on the Career Challenges podcast? Go to careerchallengespodcast.com to find out how. While you're there, check out other episodes and download them through Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Castbox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. The Career Challenges podcast is hosted by me, Kyle Weckerly. I'm a certified professional ghostwriter who works with business thought leaders and industry experts to write polished manuscripts, assess their publishing options, and create book marketing plans. I've worked with consultants, high-ticket salespeople, coaches, speakers, C-level executives, and business owners. My authors have worked for USAA, Vistage, Booz Allen Hamilton, Austin Technology Council, and Twitch. My authors know that writing a book will help them change the world. They know that the story they tell will create that change. So they want to write a book to serve as a platform for their marketing endeavors. They know a published book will help them secure more speaking gigs, market their expertise, promote a product or service, and more. So reach out to Kyle Weckerly at weckerlywriter.com to start your publishing journey. Maybe you're not ready to start that journey just yet, but you do know that you want to write a book. So where to begin? Well, if you're ready, go to weckerlywriter.com to download 101 questions to ask before writing your book. This will help you get started and will offer guidance on the next steps to turn your ideas, experience, and actionable knowledge into a completed manuscript. Just visit weckerlywriter.com to get your free copy today. That's weckerlywriter.com. weckerlywriter.com. And now, back to the Career Challenges podcast. Tyler, for you, what got you into copywriting? What was it that I guess kind of you're like, hey, I want to try that. Where did it start for you?
Yeah. So if you talk to people and ask them like what characteristics make up a copywriter, one of the most common things you'll hear is curiosity. Mm-hmm. And so I think most copywriters were just naturally curious people, and they sort of stumbled upon copywriting. And I've never met anyone who was like, oh yeah, like I studied copywriting in college and this is what I wanted to do since I was 6 or something like that. It's just, you just stumble upon it kind of. And so my background is really in writing. So there's kind of like 2 different types of copywriters that I meet. One is their background is in writing, like, creative writing, something like that. And the other one is they were like business people, they're salespeople or real estate agents, and they either wanted to make more money or their business was struggling. And so they started looking into ways of growing their business, and they found copywriting. And then they just decided like, I don't want to be a real estate agent. Like, this is way more fun. Mm-hmm. And I definitely come from the camp of liking writing. And again, there's pros and cons to each. Like, I think the people who have business and sales experience, they pick up copywriting very easily. And then people who have creative writing backgrounds, we actually have to unlearn a lot of stuff. But then once we do unlearn that and sort of learn some of the basics of copywriting, I actually think we have a huge advantage because we already know how to write compelling and interesting and sort of put like these little verbal twists on stuff that just make them get more interesting, really.
Awesome. So did you get a degree in creative writing? Because you're kind of alluding to that.
Yeah. I studied English and creative writing in school.
Awesome. Definitely. I probably should have done that. I got an art degree. Kind of not a bright move on my part. But I definitely see I definitely see what you're saying. Like unlearning a lot of the English, because I love my English classes. All my English teachers, have been imprinted into my memory, just because they were characters. They were all characters. Just interesting to talk to and to talk about. But when I got into writing as well, in ghostwriting, it's like, well, I know what works, the structure, the rules. But that's not what makes a compelling read. You gotta know what the rules are first, and then you gotta break the rules. So definitely. So then, when was that moment for you, Tyler? And is there like a specific story where you kind of realized maybe I should do this, and maybe I would have a lot of fun doing this?
So actually, just randomly, someone gave me I had worked like various jobs. Like nothing that I knew was going to be a career, but I just was out of college and I needed to make some scratch. So it's just like my neighbor would offer me a job and I'd go do that for a couple months and be like, this sucks, I'd quit and then move on to the next thing. And basically someone just gave me a book on copywriting because that's what they did. And they knew I liked writing. It was like kind of a family friend. And I read this book and quite frankly, they sold me on the dream of being a copywriter and working from home and like, making a pretty decent living. And then, it was a very slow process. Like at first I just was like, oh, I'm just going to do this like like I can do it part-time and you know, I wasn't married, I'm not married, and I don't have kids, and my expenses are super low. So like I can just work like 10, 20 hours a week. It was really dope. And then slowly over time, I just like started learning more and more about it, and how it's all about really human behavior and human psychology. And that's really like what I'm most interested in, even outside of copywriting, is like, how does the mind work? How does consciousness work? Like, how can we become better decision makers so that we can live better lives? Just very basic things like that. And honestly, that's what copywriting mostly deals with, even though it kind of gets packed up in these like salesy, you know, the 28 things you need to have to make your sales letter drip, you know, whatever. Like, so anyway, it was just a very slow process of me realizing like, this is fascinating and this is something that I can do for the rest of my life. And yeah, I'm not sure there was like really one moment. It's been a very slow slide into the sinkhole, and like now I'm just too deep to get out. So I guess I better enjoy it.
That's a great way to explain it. It's like an addiction. We can't get rid of it.
Exactly.
So then,
it's true.
Yeah, who wrote the book that you read? I mean, who was the author?
I forget. I think his name was Peter Bowerman.
I read that. The Well-Fed Writer. Yes, I read that. That was the first book on copywriting that I read.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't think it's not really a great book anymore. It's very like outdated, but I'm very thankful because they got it into writing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I got it off of Amazon. I was like, oh, there's something here, and so I read that, and that's what got me started. And of course, yeah, he's talking about stuff I think pretty much pre-internet.
They started like showing up to places with like his physical portfolio,
yeah,
like showing up like pieces of paper, like
yeah. So then from Peter Bowerman, yeah, I went and found the Freelance Writers Den, and that helped me get a good start. And then I learned about ghostwriting and got off on that tangent. But yeah, Peter Bowerman, I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Because it's usually Bob Lai, Peter Bowerman, or Steve Sloan-White who are mentioned as like the authors who got people into copywriting. Their books are out there, and it's helped a lot of people get into the field. So
Bob Lai has written like 60 books or something. He writes like a book a year.
Yeah, he just keeps going. It's pretty impressive. So then, for somebody wanting to start today into copywriting, I guess what are some resources that you would suggest?
To like learn actually how to write copy, or like to learn how to get clients?
Well, let's start with how to write copy. We can worry about clients here in a minute.
So like I'm a bit of a nerd on this stuff, and I love talking about like copywriting legends and stuff, but it's actually like kind of a tough question to answer, because one thing I've learned is that everybody learns so uniquely. And so like the people that I learned from, like I like, you know, study people who are like really good at what they did and they taught great stuff. And I'm like, it just doesn't like vibe with me. So, but I would say just start with the classics. Like one great book that's not even copywriting related is How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's all about psychology and human behavior. And I think people would read that book and be like, oh, this is, like, it talks about like smiling and using people's names, like really basic stuff. And people would kind of just like, oh, this is stupid. Like I know this stuff, but I've read it and reread it, and like it's really deep, and there's a lot there on human psychology. The GaryHalbertLetter.com. I mean, Gary Halbert's like one of the best copywriters ever, and it's all free. It's like his print newsletter that people used to pay for. If you can palate his very unpolitically correct behavior, which I don't have a problem with personally, because he's like a marketing genius. But yeah, I would honestly just say like you got to listen to podcasts. You gotta just Google it around and just find people that you vibe with, because I can list off like a bunch of names of people to learn from, but I don't know if that would really get them to do it. I think you really have to like get fed up with hearing the bull crap, and then you're like, all right, I need to like kind of get to a better person. But hey, if I'm gonna be blatantly self-promotional, they can also get on my list. And I talk about copywriting and share other people in there all the time. So
yeah, and your book, The Email Emperor, right?
Yeah, I might be taking that down, so I don't even know if by the time this comes out, it'll still be up there. But
so they better hurry.
Yeah.
So then, what resources can a burgeoning copywriter or a would-be copywriter look into to find out how to get clients?
I would say getting clients is almost entirely about your network. So especially when you're just starting out, it's going to be very hard for people to just, like, oh, hire me. Like, I'm a copywriter. Okay. Like what samples do you have? Like, what clients do you have? So I would say focus on your network, go out to anyone you know who might know anyone, like even like your grandma, and just be like, hey, I'm a copywriter now. Like, do you know anyone I can help? I would say go on all like the Facebook groups where copywriters get hired, look on Indeed, just do whatever, like look, scour the internet high and low for just someone, go on Upwork and just get a client, even if you have to do it for free or like really low paying, and then just leverage that into your next client and ask them for a referral, like turn in your work and they say, oh, this is great. Like, thank you. And say, okay, like, I'm glad you're happy. Like, would you know anyone else I could help? And so yeah, that's what I would say. I would say focus on building your network and just getting really scrappy with finding your first couple clients. Because I gotta say, it's I think if you got into copywriting 10 years ago, it's pretty easy just to be like, I'm a copywriter and get hired. But now there's so many copywriters. I would almost say like it's better not even to position yourself as a copywriter, which is something I've been thinking about. And finding something that you're good at, like one problem you can solve, and position yourself as that problem solver. So like, I mean, people will have to think about it, but
yeah, like for you, it's writing emails, right? The broadcast email.
Right. And even that's like probably not a good enough problem. Like if I really wanted to get aggressive with it, and I mean, right now I'm just kind of like have enough clients, so I'm not really looking for new ones, but I would probably do something like I help continuity programs acquire and retain more customers, something like that, like even more specific, and not say like I write your copy, be like I solve this specific problem. So like, Kyle, I get you more listeners for your podcast. And you might do that through Facebook ads, which is copy, but like, or Kyle, I help you monetize your podcast, and I might do that through email copy, but I'm speaking in terms that you like are already thinking in. You're not necessarily thinking I need an email copywriter. You're thinking, oh, how am I going to make more money off this, or whatever it is. So.
Definitely. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point to make. And hopefully somebody listening to this episode would be like, now I get it.
Well, that's like an ever evolving process. I've been telling, like the advice I just gave, I've been telling for myself for years. So
yeah, definitely. So then we got a little bit of time left here. But I guess what is a favorite story of yours working with a client? Like, do you have a favorite client story that you like to share?
Yeah, so there's a couple clients that were really cool. The first client I ever had, which is actually, if you want to get clients, I would say go to like masterminds and seminars and stuff like that. I know it's all online now. The first client I got, like I had like my hair was way past my shoulders. I was like completely unprofessional. I had a backpack that had like animals all over it. Like it looked like a children's backpack. And I just like had met this guy earlier at a seminar I was at. And I saw him at like the last hour of the last night. And I was like, hey, what's up, Randy? Like, and he was like, oh, I want to introduce you to my friend Chris. And so he introduced me, and the guy was like, oh, I'm looking for a copywriter, and just hired me right there. And that was a really cool experience because I was like totally green. I knew what I was doing. And he was like a CEO coach, like working with like Google and Adobe and IBM and things like that. So it was just like a really strange, I almost got dropped down in this like hoity-toity world of like I would go down and meet with him in the city, and they'd take me out to lunch, and they would be like talking revenue and figures. So that was a cool one just because it kind of taught me like how to think like a business owner and sort of see, like they kind of brought me on the inside of the operations. They weren't just like, write this for us. They were like, come meet with us and talk about marketing. And I could like hear their problems. I could hear how they were thinking through stuff. So that was a really cool one. Another one was I wrote for some meditation teachers for a while, and this teacher, she had kind of like abused her list, like just ignored it and would email it like once a month, which isn't a great idea. You want to keep in touch with your people frequently as possible. And she was selling like a really high ticket coaching program where she wanted to book people for like a whole year of corporate coaching. And she was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And I was like, yeah, I mean, quite frankly, it might not work. Like you might not have a good list. Like this is sort of you're taking the chance here. And I wrote her like a series of emails, and she sent out the first email, and within an hour she emailed me and was like, oh my gosh, I've already gotten responses from people like interested in my coaching. So that was a cool one just because it was like, I was not very optimistic for her. I was actually doing it like based off commission because I was like, I don't feel comfortable charging you for this, but I don't know if it'll work. And, but yeah, like the very first email people were responding. So
Wow.
Those are a couple client stories that stick out. I also worked with a client who had like a biohacking gym, which was a very cool experience because I used to like be able to go in there and use the equipment, but that's kind of a random tangent too.
Awesome. Well, those are great. Those are great. So we're just about out of time here, Tyler, but I do want to give you the opportunity. What's on the horizon for you? What's coming up that you're excited about and you want to share?
Yeah, so I'm just going to continue working with these two clients for now. It's kind of like all I can really handle on my plate, but I still sending daily emails to my list and building that relationship. Probably at some point we'll create some sort of like marketing product, but yeah, people want to connect with me further. They can go to my website at copybymccune.com and opt in. Right now they would get a free version of my book, but I might be taking that down due to like a marketing change in strategy, which is not interesting enough to go into here. But yeah, if they want to hear from me every day and sort of see how I do email marketing and get some tips and insight into my life, then you're more than welcome to go there.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, Tyler, thank you so much for being on the Career Challenges podcast with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Career Challenges podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Career Challenges podcast on your favorite podcasting app. Visit careerchallengespodcast.com for more information. And if you really like me, then you'll write a review. And don't forget to pick up your free copy of 101 Questions to Ask Before Writing Your Book by visiting weckerlywriter.com. That's WECKERLYWRITER.com.